Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our Committee of the Whole meeting for Monday, March the 3rd, 2025. I will call the meeting to order starting at 5 p.m. May I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. And the recommendation is that we go into a closed meeting of Committee of the Whole held on March 3rd at 5 p.m. in accordance with Section 239(2)(f) and (b) of the Municipal Act, considering CAO recruitment, Section 239(2)(f), advice that is subject to client solicitor privilege, including communications necessary for that purpose, and People Plan, Section 239(2)(b), personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal employees. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover, please? Moved by Councillor Martin, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favor? That carries unanimously, and we will reconvene at roughly 6 p.m. in open session. I'd be looking for a motion to reconvene an open council at 6:10 p.m. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Dunstall. All those in favor, and that carries unanimously. And welcome to everybody who's joined us in the gallery. It's nice to see you all here. So we have gathered in the township of Wilmot on the traditional territory of the Neutral, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Mississauga peoples. We want to acknowledge the importance of the Dish with One Spoon Covenant, a peace agreement made between Indigenous nations before the Europeans arrived. It characterizes our collective responsibility to each other and Mother Earth. We should take only what we need, leave enough for others, and keep the dish clean. By acknowledging this covenant and the First Nation, Inuit, and Métis people, we are reminded of our important connection to this land where we live, learn, and work together as a community. We do have a few additions to the agenda this evening, councillors, which include a presentation, a specific delegation, actually a few delegations, as well as the addition of the People Plan updated report. So the recommendation I'd be looking for, mover and seconder, is that the agenda as presented for March 3rd as amended be adopted. Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin. All those in favour? And that carries unanimously. Are there any disclosures of pecuniary interest this evening? Councillor Cressman?
Yes, Mayor, I have a pecuniary interest in 12.7. Not amending, but the awarding of the Victoria Booley Street redevelopment. The letter of recommendation for awarding this was from Walter Fady. My oldest son, Garth, is CEO at Walter Fady, and so as such, I have a pecuniary interest.
Thank you for identifying that, Councillor, and we will note that you'll be excusing yourself from the conversation and vote for 12.7. Any other disclosures, councillors? Seeing none, as I mentioned, we do have one presentation this evening, and this is in regards to the New Hamburg Arena preliminary study update. So I will now invite Bob Prince of Envisage Architects, Inc. to provide the New Hamburg Arena preliminary update, and I will turn it over to our director first.
Madam Mayor and Council, this presentation by Bob Prince from Envisage Architects gives an update on the potential revitalization of the New Hamburg Arena. This will recap key items to date, the ICIP SPIF grant requirements, stakeholder engagement that has shaped schematic designs with rendering concepts, and the Class D construction costing associated with the project. And at this time, I'll turn it over to Bob.
Thanks, Chris. Thank you, Council. Thank you for inviting us and awarding us this project. It was a real pleasure working with the township. You have some great staff here, nothing but accommodating, and I hope you enjoy what we found. I'm just going to go over a few slides. Next slide. I'm just going to recap going back to our September 10th report, which I believe everybody had the opportunity to review. I want to start with just 3 key points that came out of that. The first was that the Grand River Conservation Authority had restrictions on this site in terms of expansion, and it was limited to 100 square meters or 1,000 square feet. Now, you can change Grand River Conservation Authority rules, but it's very difficult. And just to give you some sort of context, 1,000 square feet is about half the size of one change, or about the size of 2 change rooms. So it's very limiting to try to get the requirements of this project in 1,000 square feet. So our upcoming design that we went forward with at that point had to sort of redefine the deliverables and what was defined as addition. So the township came up with some creative wording, and it was agreed by all parties that the addition could be defined as the addition of amenities within the facility as opposed to the expansion of the building's physical footprint. And this is key because we're trying to avoid any lengthy process for authoritative approvals, say with the Grand River Conservation Authority. In addition, our report was pretty clear that the $5.7 million construction cost to achieve the required deliverables was low. And that $5.7 million, I believe, was based in 2020 dollars, 2019? 19. which equates to about 7.2 now. So those are the kind of requirements we were up against to start the schematic design. And those are the key points I just want to bring from our preliminary report. Next slide. So some of the points that the required deliverables, I'm just going to go over this. This was from your grant. We were required to bring the facility up to the current Ontario Building Code standards. It was to accommodate seasonal ice. It required a new concrete rink slab, refrigeration, safety netting, dasher boards, and glass. Had to have accessible change rooms, an elevator, and it had to consolidate the operations of the Community Players Theatre Group into one facility. It was to demolish the existing wooden spectator seating and replace with fixed bleacher seating. Fire alarm system required upgrading, as well as HVAC equipment, electrical wiring panels, and plumbing infrastructure to support the planned renovations. Next slide. Okay, so some other items that we keyed in on, and these are from building assessments and talking with the various stakeholders. You had some leaks in the south stairwells that were pretty extensive. It looks like there were 2 recent additions. There was a major crack on the west exterior wall that required a lot of work, just put it simply. The fire department had concerns with the existing stairs to the community hall in regards to them acting as an exit. And then we received a lot of stakeholder input, which mainly focused on storage. Everybody wanted more storage. There were some other ideas that electronic programmable exterior signage, a permanent performance staging solution. Right now they have to, because of exiting requirements, you can't use your roll-up doors as exits, so they have to actually put a temporary wall and door system in place for each performance, which is quite onerous. And there were some other minor items. Next slide. Some of the items that we picked up on is that there's a non-standard size ice surface of 80 by 180 feet, 80 feet wide by 180 feet long. Ideally, and to create more marketing opportunities, you would like that to be NHL size of 85 feet by 200. So there's something in the back of our mind that we're just pointing out that when we go into design, these are the kind of things we're looking to address. You'd also have a lot of crossover, what we call crossover, users and spectators intermingling. As players come off the ice, they're intermingling with spectators, the teams are intermingling. It's generally not a good idea to do that for obvious reasons. People come off with tempers, and you always want to have what we call time and space between people coming off the ice and dealing with spectators. Next slide. So this is your existing floor plan. It's a bit of a small scale, but I understand you have a handout. Just to show you, you've got a pointer here. There's where I'm talking about your intermingling. Everybody's coming out through that one portal, and you're sort of getting a lot of, it's almost like a bottleneck, but it's a bottleneck of, it could be hot tempers and everything else. That's not good to have. So those are the key items that we throw into the pool and say, well, we have to address the deliverables of the a project first, which are the key items on the grant. But some of the other items, maybe we can take a look at those too. So we'll go to the next slide. All right, so this is the demolition drawing. I just show this because what we do is we remove all the spectator seating, or the wooden bench seating, and we see how much room we have to begin with. And I've left the columns there because we don't want to remove columns, they're very expensive. So we start with a blank slate. All right, next slide. All right, so now we go to the new design. So this is the ground floor plan, and we've color-coded the areas in 3 different colors: blue, green, and yellow. So the blue are the required deliverables from the grant. So the first one is the ice surface. You'll see that we are using the same ice surface. We looked at enlarging it, but structural modifications that happened in the building throughout the years have limited the length. So we really can't get into that. So we're going back to the same size ice surface. We have envisioned it as being 0 level entry for accessibility. That means there's no step getting on and off the ice. We want to make it accessible. It's also good for minor league hockey, but just general accessibility through the multi-use nature of the facility when you use it for trade shows and such. And we were able to use the existing refrigeration room in the corner there. It's gray. Oops, that's not working there, but That has to do with the ice plant, and that was another, as I said, required deliverable. So now we've got the addition of the change room. So we've got a typical 6+1, they call it, change room model. This is 6 change rooms for users, 2 of which are barrier-free or accessible in design. They're each there's 4 at 500 square feet, and then the 2 accessible change rooms are 650 square feet. The way we've placed them is we had to deal with the columns there, and if you see where the columns are, it's actually very difficult to try to fit these change rooms in, but we've got them all fitting in within the existing shell, and what's left is a corridor on the outside. This also, you see we've created time and space. So the players come in, they come in through this door, they're separated, they go into the change room area, the spectators go this way. So you're creating time and space with patrons and the users. They're split evenly on both sides. You have 3 and 3. You have a referee's change room in the corner there. And when we did that, we utilized that existing corridor, and all we did was we punched a few windows on the outside of the wall. It was a very limited amount of money, but we thought, bringing natural light in is one thing, but people feel more secure walking down a long corridor when you can see the outside. So having that long corridor, we felt that we would just add a few windows. We've also got the community player space on the front. We've given them in the blue top right-hand corner, we've given them a space of 1,000 square feet. They can use that room for anything they want. They could subdivide it. They could use it as multi-purpose office space, but it's right off the lobby. It's what we call prime space. It's at the front of the house. We've also placed an elevator at the front of the building. As soon as you come in, and I'm going to talk about the stair beside it in a minute, but those are the key requirements of the grant, and they all fit within the existing footprint. We were surprised, but hey, it worked very well. The next color I'm going to talk about is the green. So these are items that were not listed in the grant, but are required because of the grant deliverables. So for example, they don't list an ice resurfacer room in the grant, but if you're going to make ice, you're going to need an ice resurfacer room. So that's in the top left corner there. We've separated it away from spectators and users. It's at the top left corner there, and it operates on its own. You also need a mechanical and electrical room for these new services, the hot water tanks for the showers and everything. So we've got a mechanical room. Actually, that should be green. I think I sent you, Chris, the wrong slide here, but on the just to the south or the left-hand corner. So those are also required, and they add cost to the building, but they are required if you're going to deliver the requirements of the grant. Okay, so the last item I'm going to talk about is the yellow ones. So these are items that we had from stakeholder input and others. So the first one I'm going to bring up is the fire department's concern with the current stair that's used by the community hall. They had a problem with it in terms of being used as an exit. It was open. So what we've done is we've addressed that by just using another stair as an exit that's further to the top of the page there. I don't know why this isn't working there, but anyway. And that allows us to create another open stair right at the lobby that goes upstairs to the community room or to the bleacher area. So it's a shared stair and it's right beside the elevator. Very limited cost, and it addresses one of the building code items. And all we did at the front of the house there is just to rearrange some of the spaces. We used the existing walls. We created another multi-use room, a multi-purpose room, and an office. So we did very little there, just rearranged it a bit. We've got entrance doors. Where am I here? Entrance doors, west side. And we reworked the south exit just to address stakeholder concerns about wheeling from the community players group, wheeling gear up and down these steps. They have a temporary ramp that they pull out, so we just created a ramp, and this also actually offers barrier-free access to the arena floor from the adjacent fields that are to the east. The last item I'm going to talk about on this floor is this lobby. You'll see what we've done. This is probably the single most biggest feature that we did is by demolishing the wall, just by demolishing the wall, we didn't add anything. We actually just removed the wall and put a couple of columns in there, very limited. But what it does is it opens up your entire lobby, so now people have a warm viewing area right off the ice surface, and you could have a drink rail there, tables. This is a really recent development in arenas that is very well regarded. People just want to sit in a warm area, watch what's going on the ice. You can have a coffee, you can sit at a table, you can be with someone in a wheelchair. It's just generally a well-regarded area. You can put drink rails, but you're tying the lobby right to the ice surface. There's no intermediate space, and it makes for a much bigger lobby. So, just in conclusion, on this floor level, it was we found that this is a really efficient use of existing space. We managed to fit all the program in. The recently renovated lobby that you had over here, we've left that untouched. Most of the walls that are existing have not been, the bearing walls specifically, except for the one that I pointed out, but most of the layout at the front of that lobby where you just did that work, we did not touch at all. We demolished the stairs at the left, or at the south end of the building. Those weren't required, they were leaking, so the best way to deal with that was to just demolish them. On the west side, we added 2 doors at the top. Now, that was required to address the community players' problem of having to do, put in the roll-up door, put in that temporary wall and door arrangement that they have to have for performances for exiting. But what it also did is it got rid of the crack, the big structural problem we had there. We just simply removed the wall and we replaced it with doors. And that seemed to be a good trade-off. So from our point, it's a pretty cost-efficient design. There's no wasted space. There's no architectural fluff. This is meeting the program requirements. All right, let's go to the next slide. So now I'm going to go to the second floor. This is the existing layout that you have. You have your community hall on the right-hand side. There's a warm viewing area that's accessed somehow off of the hall. I'm not quite sure how that works. I was up there, but there is a warm viewing area, and then you have the wooden bleacher seating that's in not in very good shape. Okay, so the next slide. Again, so, demolition. So
Bob, I just want you to know you have about a minute remaining.
A minute, okay, all right.
Yes, well, so if you just want to get in your final point.
Demolition. Next slide. So the new areas here, I'm going to point out the quickly in blue. These are the required areas, the bleacher, the new seating. We put it at one end to use the existing structure to help support it, but it also provides a different viewing for the community players group. They could use that as different tiered seating. You know, they could have a lounge connected to the hall. That offers a whole opportunity for marketing from their standpoint. We use the roof of the of the new change room construction to house all the storage that was required. And again, this was just using what was there because this is a 2-story space. We have all the area below it or above it that we can use as storage. The elevator again comes up at the front with the stair. The community hall does get smaller, but we did check all their layouts that they confirmed that they can use that space. The last thing I'm going to mention is, yeah, you'll see a walking track, but because we had to create the space for the change rooms below, the ice resurfacer and the storage on the south side, and the bleachers on the north, all we did was we filled in the little gaps. And now all of a sudden you've got a walking track. So there was a lot of value added to that with very little cost. Okay, next slide. I'm just going to show you a couple of views. These renderings are not what I would call completely commercial quality, but I'm going to give you see the arrow there? Just a view of the stair as you come in off the entrance. Next slide.
So, Bob, I do know that council has received these renderings,
right,
and we have quite an extensive agenda to get through as well. But thank you very much for coming in. Councillors, are there any questions for Bob, noting that we, of course, have this topic coming up on 12.3 with the staff report, so this would just be questions specifically for the architect. Okay, not seeing any. Thank you again very much for coming and presenting to us. We appreciate your time, Bob. Thank you. This evening, we do have 4 specific interest delegations registered to address the Committee of the Whole. Each speaker will have 7 minutes to address Council, and I will call upon them when it is their turn to speak. I'd like to remind all delegations of some guidelines for participation. For those who are joining us in person, please proceed to the podium when called upon to speak. If you conduct yourself in any of the following manners, it will result in an immediate removal from the meeting, including interrupting councillors, staff, or other delegations, derogatory statements about councillors, staff, or others, turning your camera on at inappropriate times, and hate speech or defamatory comments. One last reminder for delegations, please do not take offense if following your presentation there are no questions from council. This is council's time to really listen and reflect upon opinions and ideas shared with us from our community members. And although it is rare, I would like to remind delegates and members of the public that failure to adhere to appropriate decorum may result in your microphone being muted and or removal from the meeting. Out of respect for all meeting participants, I do kindly ask those in the gallery to remain seated unless exiting the chamber and avoid personal conversations and expressions of support or opposition for those speaking in order to allow everyone to hear the proceedings as they occur. As I noted, they are specific interest delegations on particular reports coming forward, so I will call on you when we get to the appropriate reports. We have no correspondence for this evening, and we do have on our consent agenda item 4 items listed. Would anybody like to pull out any of the items? Councillor Cressman?
The water quality one, I'd like just a few questions I'd like to ask.
Absolutely. Go ahead for 11.4.
Yes, I see that the 5 incidents, this is through you, Mayor, to Director Molyneux, were in the Mannheim distribution system, total coliform, and they were rectified by flushing. Was there a boil water order as a result of it, or what was the implications to the population?
Through you, Mayor, no, there was not a boil water advisory. I guess the incidents typically occur, and it's a common occurrence. And so the first course of action is to flush and to resample, and when the results come back as okay, then we just proceed with carrying on with regular business.
So, just so I'm clear, was that at 5 different locations in the distribution system, or was it didn't clear up on the first flushing, so you had to continue to flush repeatedly to get it to clear up?
Through you, Mayor, so there's typically, I guess, common locations that we might see and common times of the year that we might see some of those incidents. When we have the incidents, they're typically in that particular distribution system, they're associated with things like power outages or that kind of thing where the system needs to sort of reboot, and then we come in and have to do a sampling and a flushing as a result of that. So it's not necessarily, we'll say, the same location and continued. It's at the same time, it might be a couple different occurrences, but it's not multiple reflushing and a resampling of the same incident.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you. Through the chair to Director Molyneux. Curious about the water quality report, but as it relates to Petersburg, there was obviously a very high level of, I think it's trihalomethanes or THMs, I think it was reported. It was almost like 400 times what the average was comparatively across the township. So I'm curious, 1, what is that? And 2, what may be causing that, if there's any insight into that, please.
Through you, Mayor. So our typical, I guess, in terms of the distribution system, most of those, we'll say, results would come from the treatment side. And so that would relate more so to the Region of Waterloo's work. We can certainly follow up with you on what that might relate to and what might be causing that particular issue, but I don't have that answer for you tonight.
Any other questions, councillors, on item 11.4? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, just to clarify one more point on that. So that in itself is not going to cause any risk to the public?
Through you, Mayor, no, if it was going to cause any form of health risk, then that would be something we would have to deal with appropriately through the regulations in terms of notice and providing other forms of drinking water. So that's not something that is a health risk.
Any other comments or questions on 11.4? Seeing none, are there any other consent agenda reports councillors want to pull out? Seeing none, I would ask for a mover and a seconder for passing all consent agenda. Moved by Councillor Wilkinson, seconded by Councillor Cressman. All those in favor, that carries unanimously. On to our reports for this evening. We will start with 12.1. The recommendation is that report CAO-2025-06 be received and that RFP 2025-03 is attached and 1 be issued with a closing date of to be determined. I would either look for a mover or seconder on this item or somebody just looking to receive this item for information. I will leave that open to council's discretion. If somebody wants to move something, that's what I'm looking for. Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I know I've thought about this report, and in a previous meeting, I had been in favor of it. I'm thinking in terms of the process, I'm wondering if we could defer it, and I'm thinking maybe defer it to the last quarter of the year.
Okay, so I would still need a mover or seconder for, if we're going to do a deferral, we would need to have a motion
So then
on the floor.
I'm sorry for not wording it properly.
That's
My
okay.
motion is to defer it to the last quarter of.
No, sorry, we don't actually have a motion on the floor at the moment. We need a mover and seconder either to get the staff recommended motion on the floor and then you can defer it. We just need
Okay,
something
so
on the
then
floor to defer.
Okay, move to put it on the floor so that we can discuss it.
Moved by Councillor Martin. Is that seconded by Councillor Cressman? Okay, now you can put your deferral.
So then I would move that we defer this to the last quarter of the year.
Okay, is there a seconder for that? Seconded by Councillor Sadhu. This would be time or place. If anybody has comments or questions on the time or place, Councillor Dunstall.
Last quarter seems a little long, so I'm thinking perhaps third quarter, beginning of third quarter. That work for you as a friendly amendment? Councillor Martin?
Yes.
Okay.
So sorry, to the end of third quarter or start of third quarter? Just for
Start of third quarter.
Start of third quarter, okay. So the motion is, or I guess our seconder, do you approve of moving it to start of third quarter? Okay. So motion to defer, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? All those opposed? And that is passed. On to the CAO-2025-05 People Plan Update. The recommendation is that the People Plan Update be received for information and that Council direct staff to report back on corporate culture initiatives and results, and that Council direct staff to report back in Q3 with a People Plan report and a 5-year plan for Council's approval. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin, and I will invite our acting CAO, Director of Corporate Services and CFO, Greg Clark, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So as per council direction, this report provides an update on the people plan and organizational review. The people plan was started in Q1 2022. Whitesell and Company was awarded the contract to carry out the work necessary to review the current organization structure and culture and develop a plan to move the organization forward. Initial work included a current situation analysis and a culture survey completed by Culture AMP. And based on this work, it was identified that there were organizational gaps in the clerk's office and the CLT structure. Adjustments to both were made in May and October of 2022, and this work required more time by Whitesell than originally budgeted for, and therefore the timeline originally set was not met. As well, increased costs were incurred by Whitesell due to this extra time and effort. Additionally, support was needed during the transition, and on-purpose leadership was hired to assist the CAO during this time. After these changes were completed, a phase 2 was planned and begun to finalize the review of the org structure and culture. Due to health issues and other project demands, Whitesell's availability was limited throughout 2023. As well, 2 directors left the organization during this time, and recruitment of the Director of Corporate Services stretched into Q1 2024. Work to finalize the people plan internally was started in the summer of 2024. However, due to resource capacity issues, it was again put on hold. And so this brings us to today, where staff are planning to complete the final phase internally over the next 6 months and bring a report to council in September of 2024 that includes the following: recommendations on current org structure, reflecting approved changes and any additional proposed changes, review of resource additions over the next 5 years, or over the past 5 years, demonstrating alignment with organizational priorities, identification of future resource needs over the next 5 years based on growth forecasts and known service delivery demands, proposal for additional action items identified from the culture survey. And later this week, myself and the manager of HR will be meeting with John Whitesell to ensure we have all materials, including those in draft, related to this project. And it is not anticipated at this time that we will need external support to finalize this work.
Thank you very much, Director Clark. Councillors, we do have one delegation on this evening, so I would ask if you have any technical questions right now, you can ask them now. Then we'll have our delegate and then go into further comments and questions. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. CAO Clark, the cultural survey, that was done with all of the employees, correct? Yes.
Yes.
Full-time and part-time?
Full-time for sure. I'm not 100% sure if all of part-time were included. I'd have to go back and confirm that.
Okay, perfect, thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Thank you. Through the chair, when reading through the materials here, there appears to be 3 different organizational charts. I'm curious, what is the most accurate at this point?
Through you, Madam Mayor, to the councillor, I would say that all of these materials are representations of the work that was carried out. So we can provide an updated current org structure. This is just representing the work that was done on the people plan. So I'd have to take a quick look because I don't know if any of them, because the most recent one is from February of 2023. So there's probably some changes since then.
Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, just as a follow-up. So the attachment number 2, which is the draft township of Wilmot current org chart, that is an internal document, but that's not necessarily accurate or up to date?
Through you, Madam Mayor, that was what we began working on last summer, and so that was a starting point for discussions in the summer, but it reflected work that had been carried forward from 2023, so it was a snapshot in time. I can't confirm whether it's 100% accurate at this point.
Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor, to Acting CAO Clark. I can't see it in front of me now, and I got confused with these different org charts as well. But it was something about a manager of strategy, and I was surprised by that because I thought that would be nested under the job description of the CAO. That was crucial for the CEO to carry that portion of the responsibility.
So through Madam Mayor to the councillor, the intention of including these documents is to demonstrate the work that was carried out. In terms of moving forward, that's what we plan to bring back, is how it all fits together now. I wasn't part of the process, so I can't really speak to things that may have been put in there, the thoughts behind them and stuff. This is really just to give a representation of the work that was carried out.
Just one comment in there, Councillor Cressman, though. There was a role, it has since been re-envisioned, but there was a role that was hired while we were on council for a manager of communications and strategic initiatives, which I believe was fulfilling what that stage of the plan had looked like. Again, has since been changed into a different format. Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair to interim CAO Clark, given that this project was slated to essentially be completed 2 years ago, and I think you're seeing it for the first time, we're seeing it for the first time, I'm curious. I mean, council's changed. We've had a change in leadership at the CAO level. Directors have changed. Staff have changed. I guess my question is moving forward with Whitesell and Company, I mean, how much value can we put on the work that was done 4 or 5 years ago moving forward? I'm just curious if you have any concerns at all about using the data that exists and sort of picking up this project 2 years later.
Through Madam Mayor to the councillor. So in terms of the org structure, I think a lot of the work that was done was the heavy lifting of creating a new CLT framework and establishing the 4 departments as it's structured now. I think the work for phase 2 is then taking those departments and making sure that they're structured properly, which development services and infrastructure services for the most part had been completed. What was missing was community services and corporate services because Director Catania and myself had not been brought on board. So I think that it's still valuable in the sense that we will be taking a look at our perspective portfolios and establishing that. In terms of the culture piece, I think it's a starting point to ask additional questions. So I don't see it as taking it at face value and just applying solutions, but I think it helps us ask new questions now. So I do think there'll be some additional questions we need to focus on, probably in targeted areas which have been identified to see if anything has changed. My experience with engagement surveys, which is typically what I've heard these called, is that you need to check in regularly to see if there's movement. So my idea would be that we would identify 3 or 4 core areas, see if there's been any significant change in the last 3 years in terms of staff opinions and feelings in those areas, and then that would help us determine whether we need to take additional steps.
Any additional questions at this time before we call on our delegate? Okay, seeing none. As I mentioned, we have 1 registered delegation for this item. I will now invite Barry Wolf, who I believe is joining us virtually this evening, to address council. Barry, you will have 7 minutes.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good. Was a little technology there. Madam Chair, I'm talking to you from Florida, and I appreciate your understanding as I address the report before you tonight in the context of real-life events and in the context of complementary policies and practices that exist in the township. As Chair, Mayor, I'd invite you please to advise me when I'm down to 2.5 minutes so that I can skip, as history shown, is probably necessary so that I can focus on my summary recommendations. Appreciate your nod. Thank you. On July 5th, 2021, a previous Wimmera Council ignored the input of its citizens and voted to shut down a project. Over 75% of the citizens wanted a different decision, and I asked myself, how did this come to this? Why is council so out of touch with citizens' desires? How are decisions made in the township? How is this castle organized? Where is the internal power that is pushing council away from the political realities in Wilmot? Who controls the power over access to information and knowledge, and thus who controls the power to influence and control decisions? This is an organizational and a people structure question. It turns out, after 3.5 years of digging into township documents, that I came to the same conclusion as is stated on page 3 of this report, CAO 2025-05, where it says, quote, there were concerns with corporate culture as well as the operating structure. I've concluded that the concerns that citizens have had with how this township makes decisions and why they are, for all eventualities, ignored is based on who has control over access to factually accurate information and who controls, who gets what information, when, why, and in what form. My conclusion is that individual councillors and individual citizens got only what a series of CAOs have wanted to provide. There still exists a culture of secrecy. When a councillor asks for information, the answer is most often one of these. I'll take it under advisement and get back to you. Or we don't have the staff or software capabilities to get that for you. Or every municipality in Ontario wishes it had the capacity to provide that information. Or that will take hundreds of hours and many months to get back to you. Or I take direction only from council as a body, and you'll have to pass a motion requesting that information. On the Titanic, the shipboard stewards put extensive effort into adding and rearranging the deck chairs, yet the ship went down. It was a culture of engineering arrogance and captain ignorance that resulted in tragedy. No amount of adding, subtracting, or reorganizing little colored boxes and hierarchical flowcharts will change this inappropriate corporate management culture in Wilmot. Until council acts as a unified body to provide direction to its hired staff, council will continue to be a sycophantic body dependent upon accepting written reports of what the CAO and staff want to do, when they want to do it, and how they want to do it. Council must lead a change in practice and culture by getting its act together.
Barry, I
Fine.
just want to let you know you're really close towing the line here on getting towards derogatory comments, both of staff, existing, present, and of council. So if you can please keep your comments in check there.
Thank you.
How do I speak with authority to power? Somebody's got to tell the truth here. I would suggest that it has to adopt a strong mayor format to break log jams within segments of council. It needs to hire a CAO who can lead a change in corporate culture within the management staff within an incremental timeline for stages of successful change. In effect, council needs to adopt the practices available to it by the OMA to provide the leadership direction to a CAO and their staff, and practices that require accountability reporting to council.
2.5 minutes.
Okay, that's good. But the copy of this will be available as attachment, and people can read that on the web and on my website. I'll get down to my recommendations. One, hire a new CAO. It's in process. Several residents have put together suggestions and have already delegated to small groups of councillors, as we're aware. More of those will come. Two, redefine the role of the CAO so that one person has less power to filter information and exert arbitrary control over decision-making. The CAO role is a coordinator, a facilitator, a leader down to hired staff. Recent CAOs have redefined the role and acted as if they were the top executive position in the corporation. That is
Point of
false.
order, again, it feels like.
The top executive
point of
position is
order.
held by the
Point of
mayor.
order, point of
Sorry, we're
order.
just going to pause your time for a moment here, Barry, as I do have a councillor calling a point of order. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, it seems to me that this is criticism of CAOs, and I don't think that that is appropriate.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Martin. Mr. Wolf, I will just again caution you, please, I appreciate that you're bringing recommendations that we're looking at moving forward and not critiquing current or past staff. If you can please stick to that, we will restart your time. Whenever you're ready.
Am I unmuted?
Yep, we can hear you.
Direct the new CAO to create a software summary on a multi-year calendar of all the annual work tasks and goals for every department, representing every employee, so that not just the department heads and the CAO, but also council and taxpayer knows who does what when. Council can then plan its own agenda so that it is aware of what reports it can demand or expect to be appearing in a timely manner, so that appropriate deliberation and consultation with citizens can occur. No more urgent or emergency agenda items appearing on an agenda. Council must put policies and practice into place that require long-term schedule planning for projects. Council must have a plan to know what is upcoming, when, why, and from whom. I would suggest that you move the position of Manager of Communications and Strategic Initiatives out of the CAO's office and place it under Council, similar to that of Carla's. This makes this position independent of influence as intended in the Corporate Communication and Community Engagement Strategy report. Direct this new CAO in coordination with the Clerk's Office and the Manager of Communications to produce an electronic database summary of all policies in the policy manual with searchable headings. Thus, council has a calendar of which policies will be up for review when, and the agendas can produce scheduling, such as Councillor Dunstall said with Q3, scheduling when council will be first table of policies reviewed.
Barry, if you can just wrap up in about 2 sentences or so, as you've reached your time.
Okay, let me go down to the last one, which is adopt a strong mayor model to eliminate cliques which have been manipulated. I'm looking forward to Wilmot having a new CAO who will have the qualifications and experience to, in cooperation with council and citizens, lead a cultural change in the corporation's structure and administration. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Barry, especially for taking the time to join us from the sunny south. I appreciate your comments. I do just want to note, in terms of your recommendation for adopting a strong mayor's, that is up to the province to delegate that authority. As a council, we do not get to make that decision. And as you did already note, we are currently undergoing CAO recruitment. But with that, again, I'd like to thank you for your time. I don't see any questions, and enjoy the rest of your time down south. Council, moving on to if anybody has any additional questions on the people plan. Otherwise, I will call the vote on the motion that's before us. Okay, Councillor Wilkinson? Sorry, never mind. Without seeing any other comments, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to item 12.3, which this again is the New Hamburg Arena preliminary update, which we did have our architect consultant already give us an overview. But the recommendation is that the report for the New Hamburg Arena study update be received for information, and that council direct staff to develop a plan for alternative uses at the New Hamburg Arena Community Centre based on the financial implications in this report, as well as the budget decisions that council made regarding this project. But I will turn it over to our Director of Community Services to introduce the report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. On the, just following up on Bob's presentation here, this report provides council key preliminary tasks undertaken to advance the New Hamburg Arena reconstruction multi-use project. These tasks encompass the collection and analysis of feedback received from stakeholder groups, as well as regulatory agencies following the review of the initial concept design. The insights gathered have informed our current schematic designs. This report underscores the interconnections between various project components, identifies critical dependencies, and presents a clear, comprehensive, and transparent overview of the project's progress to date. Additionally, it highlights the strategic efforts made to ensure that the design aligns with the community needs and the project's overarching objectives. The schematic design developed by Envisage architects integrate architectural, mechanical, and electrical elements at a high level, assist in preparing the Class D construction estimate that's at approximately $16.1 million. The financial implications with proceeding, including the use of the $4.2 million ICIP SPIF grant, is not viable at this time, and that long-term need for additional investment is required beyond the scope of this work. The township can continue its current role of supporting the delivery of recreation, culture, and events for the community at the New Hamburg Arena with no impact to existing users. As such, staff will continue to pursue grant opportunities that are scoped appropriately to make the New Hamburg Arena a continued viable space for year-round warm floor space. This option would address indoor dry floor activities suitable for pickleball, baseball training, lacrosse, and so on, as well as a performing arts facility as required, but does not alleviate the immediate demand for additional ice. In lieu of additional infrastructure, immediate needs are being investigated through potential shared use agreements with neighboring municipalities. This, along with revisiting the current ice allocation and affiliation policies, may allow for enhanced ice priorities. Staff will continue to funding sources to support new infrastructure and reinvestment. This includes grants applied for the long term, reserves or contribution of reserves, and engaging user groups to assist with any specific fundraising or sponsorship campaigns. I'm happy to answer any questions that council may have on this project.
Thank you very much, Director. Before we get into questions, may I have a mover and seconder to get this motion on the floor? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Sadoo. And I will go to Councillor Dunstall for questions.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I love the design, I can tell you that much, but coming in at, we only have less than a third of the money required, obviously, we can't do that. One of the questions I did want to ask you, and I think I already know the answer to this, is do we have to spend money in order to start that grant? Meaning, is there anything that we could do using that grant money that would help update the arena, or do we have to actually spend money for them to give us that grant money?
Through you, Madam Mayor, there's two parts to this. So with the $4.2 million from the grant, we have to deliver exactly what's in the scope of that grant. And as well, when we look at the grant, any type of reimbursement that we would get with the grant, we would actually have to put those funds out first.
Thank you.
Councillor Cressman?
Yes, I heard somewhere, whether it's through the grapevine or what, through you, Mayor, I didn't hear it from you. The question is the roof. There is some comment that the roof would possibly need to be replaced, and I don't believe I saw anything in the presentation about the roof. My experience with renovations is the unknowns when you get into a renovation often prove very, very costly. So I'm just kind of wondering where we stand on, not that we're standing on the roof, but where the roof is in this scenario.
Through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Cressman, you're correct. The roof in our 10-year capital will be identified because it's a living, breathing document. There is some work that needs to be done to the roof over the next, probably in a couple, 2 or 3 years' time from now. So that it's not addressed specifically at the $16.1 million in the Class D estimate, because the Class D estimate only includes your base construction costs and design costs. And you've also mentioned regarding contingencies, that funding does not include any type of contingencies of unknowns that we might run into as well. So,
Any other questions? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, and thank you, Director Catania, for putting this forward, and I agree with our decision in budget. I think the design is great. I appreciate the architect bringing the designs forward. It's nice to look at the pictures. It's wonderful to dream, but we just don't have the money right now. So I like that idea of looking for grants, seeing what we can do in the future. I'm just curious, some people have asked, could we use the floor for pickleball as the building now stands? Is that something that's in the works? Is there any discussion about that?
through you, Madam Mayor, to Councillor Martin, we actually currently use it, the floor space, for some of our recreational activities. Obviously, during the, let's say, shoulder seasons, or even in the summertime when the climate's a little bit more conducive in that building, because with the building envelope right now, we don't have any heat in that building. So difficult to have pickleball maybe in the middle of January. We do take advantage of, obviously, our spring, summer, and early fall months. That'd be something as well that we would have to address with that facility, is making sure that it could be a year-round climate-controlled facility.
Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you, through you, Mayor. This is actually for you, Mayor. I believe you were in the meeting that we had with the Minister of Sports, that's ministry, and we talked about some of our challenges, and I don't remember what the follow-up was going to be from that meeting, so I was hoping you could update.
Yeah, absolutely. So for context, at the Rural Ontario Municipal Association conference back in January, councillors who were present, which was Councillor Cressman, Dunstall, Martin, and myself, along with a few staff, delegated to multiple ministries, including Minister Lumsden, who's the Minister of Sport. We did delegate this based off of what Director Catania had brought up about funding models with the province for projects like this, and how specifically for rural and smaller municipalities, it's great to get funding partnerships with the province, but when you're looking at a 40 provincial cost share with 60% for the municipality, it's often quite difficult to have the tax base, even when you're not going through financial issues like we are, to be able to make up that additional 60%. So we had delegated about asking for the province to essentially reassess and kind of looked at populations of 50,000 and under, getting a different cost share for funding agreements on community spaces. The follow-up that was requested was that the mayor's office send that in a more detailed writing, including the outline of our current situation, which was with this project. That follow-up has been done, but it was done and then the writ was called 2 days later. So I doubt that much movement has really happened beyond that since the election just finished. However, that is to update where we are at with that particular delegation. Any other questions or comments? Councillor Sadhu?
Yeah, I beat you to the punch. Just a comment in general, just looking at the design, it does check a lot of boxes for me, especially when we compare to our initial third ice pad proposition that was brought to us when we first got elected, which was, I believe it was in the $19 million just for essentially 3 walls and an ice pad, which would also be taking out soccer fields to add additional parking. It is a big cost, $11 million. However, I think it does check a lot of boxes of repurposing an old arena, not just strictly being ice, having a community center upstairs, having ability for, during the summertime for having the TCP and other organizations using it. Just my thoughts in general, if we were willing to go ahead with something for $19 million just for an ice pad, this would make a lot more sense too. Just given that it is cheaper, but it is repurposing something that has been here for a long time. Those are just my general thoughts at the moment.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Thank you, through the chair. I think just general comment, I agree with what a lot of my colleagues are saying. I mean, reviewing it and comparing it to, say, some of the other options in front of us, I thought it was a cost-effective use, and the facility did check a lot of boxes in terms of it would be nice to see some updated infrastructure and bones to the building in terms of providing heating and insulation, as well as some future potential uses in storage. However, again, we are just in a position where we are unable to afford this at this time. So it's a shame to lose the funding, because truly when you take it into account, it becomes probably the best costed option I think we've seen to date. However, potentially down the road, we'll see additional grants or potential community fundraising, who knows? But I would ask everyone, if this is a project you'd want to see go forward, I mean, please write the province and see if you can get us more funding, if anything. That's all.
Any other comments or questions before we call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor, and that carries unanimously. On to report 12.4, and this is the Arts and Culture Master Plan interim report. The recommendation is that the report for the 2025 Arts and Culture Master Plan interim report be received for information. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Cressman, seconded by Councillor Martin, and I will turn it back over to Director Catania to introduce this report.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. This report provides Council with information and update on the Community Services Arts and Culture Master Plan, and to inform Council on key findings and next steps for approval of the Township of Wilmot's Arts and Culture Master Plan. The interim report creates a benchmark with respect to how the Township is currently meeting the arts and cultural needs of its residents. It includes quantitative results of the current inventory of assets, demographics, and growth projections. It is further informed by qualitative information through stakeholder engagement, policy alignment, trends and best practices, and sound planning principles. The interim report does not contain any specific recommendations at this point. It rather helps identify the gaps and how those gaps could be addressed. The report also identifies strengths the Township is positioned to meet the ensuing years that include existing natural and heritage assets, vibrant special events, and strong presence of local artists and musicians. However, through various stakeholder engagements, further opportunities emerged that included investigating potentially feasibility of some type of cultural facility, further access to township halls, expansion of programming beyond Castle Kilbride, enhanced municipal coordination with third-party stakeholders, as well as an awareness of existing programming that's out in the community, and increasing recognition and support for the Indigenous culture. Staff are in the next phase of this project that entailed drafting priorities and implementation of a roadmap towards a master plan. This includes further promoting key findings to our community through various communication channels, community services, and the master plan consultants' steps. We'll make a presentation to Council this spring responding to any action items arising to date and the draft recommendations. This will include further stakeholder engagement on our recommendations and any necessary refinements before any final report for Council to adopt. Happy to answer any questions Council may have.
Thank you very much, Director. Again, this is for information, but do we have any questions, councillors? Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, maybe more of a comment and maybe an observation of what I'm looking to see when the report returns. But reading the report, I think one of the takeaways I sort of heard, I mean, we definitely are strong in a lot of areas where Director Catania had pointed out. However, some of the community feedback from different groups and stakeholders that are looking to engage in put on events or cultural pieces in the township was that there was some red tape that exists from an administrative standpoint, but also it's funny that we were just talking about this, but a lack of spaces available. So I know we're limited and constrained in terms of budget, but it'd be interesting to see what your group can come up with in terms of offering alternative spaces and areas. Not that I need an answer immediately, but that's what I'd be looking for when it comes back.
I believe that's been noted. Councillor Dunstall?
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. One of the things that I was reading in there was about the community engagement, about the strengths of our community. And I mean, other than parks and trails and that kind of thing, the one thing that stuck out to me was local traditions, which I thought was very important. It made me think of the fireworks thing. I just want to make sure that when that comes up, we make sure that we keep those fireworks, because I know the kids love that kind of stuff. But I also think it's important when we're looking at cutting things that our communities do cherish and really appreciate the traditions that we put on. So I think that's something that we need to make sure we don't lose.
I believe that's also been noted by our director. Are there any other comments or questions, councillors? Okay, seeing none, all those in favor of receiving for information? And that's carried unanimously. On to 12.5, and I believe this is what a lot of our gallery is here for tonight. This is the official plan amendment application for 02-24 and zone change application for 03-24, which is 59 Bergie Court and 12 Shepherd Place in New Hamburg. The recommendation is frankly quite long and it's in front of council, so I will not be reading it. But to get this on the floor, may I please have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will now invite our Manager of Planning and Economic Development, Andrew Martin, to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor Salonen. I will comment on the report briefly. There's a lot of detail in that report that hopefully individuals have had an opportunity to read. Briefly, though, that these applications were previously considered at a public meeting in September. There's two components to the application. One, an official plan amendment. That is to clarify the boundary of the open space designation to align with the developable area of the property as supported by the Grand River Conservation Authority. The second part is the actual zoning amendment application, which proposes to amend the current zoning to allow for a redevelopment of the site with up to 35 townhome units. It also includes a number of minor amendments to the regulations that are applicable to Zone 4A, which is the townhome zoning. And those are outlined in the report in detail, what each request is, and is illustrated on the site plan with notations in the report. I will get to the main piece of the report that tries to go through the concerns and comments that we've received from residents. The applicant did have meetings with residents to have discussions and ultimately did provide a response document that went through the written concerns received, providing responses to those comments. Within the staff report, we further divulge into those concerns that were raised and into 6 key themes. I won't go through each one of them. 2 that I'll comment on primarily at this point are the theme related to housing form and density, and the second being traffic and parking. First of all, there's been some concerns raised about the introduction of townhomes within development or within a residential area that's primarily single detached dwellings. Townhomes are considered to fit within the same scope of housing as a single, a semi, duplex, townhomes. They all fit within the same realm of housing types and densities, and certainly are found in integrated developments throughout Baden and New Hamburg, both within introduction into existing neighborhoods and also within greenfield developments. So it is pretty commonplace to see townhomes mixed with single detached dwellings, and really a two-story townhome is considered to be in the same form and density as a traditional single detached dwelling. What we did in the report is actually went through and provided a comparison of units per hectare in existing townhome developments in Baden and New Hamburg. So we looked at ones all of them within Baden and New Hamburg, and categorized them either by greenfield development or intensification and redevelopment, and basically provided the densities in units per hectare. And then on average came out to a density of 19.3 units per hectare. This development is proposing 19.1 units per hectare. So it certainly is consistent, or actually less than the average. There is a range there, but that is in the report for clarification. So all this to say that certainly the introduction, while it is different, a different form of housing, and certainly a change in the neighborhood, we recognize those concerns from people that there are changes. But from a staff perspective, from a proper land use perspective, certainly the introduction of this form of housing is consistent with what's anticipated within the township urban areas. The second part that was of some concern was the background with respect to traffic, the introduction of driveways on Shepherd Place. There was a TIS that was completed in support of the application, looked at the traffic movements at the intersection of Shepherd and Bergie and the access points being proposed. And out of that traffic report, there was no requirements. The roads function appropriately now, and even in an extreme situation where they've doubled the traffic volume counts that were measured in the traffic study, the intersection and roads continue to operate efficiently without any need for changes. The developer did hear concerns that were raised about the introduction of parking on Shepherd Place. Certainly there's a lot of, the driveways are longer, the need for parking on the street isn't as common as some neighborhoods. And the developer did respond to that concern by increasing the driveway depths and widths to provide further potential for off-street parking on Shepherd Place to perhaps minimize the need or convenience of parking on the street. The idea of introducing new driveways on Shepherd Place, new driveways on Bergie Court, from an operational technical standpoint, there were no concerns raised, and staff would suggest there are no technical reasons why those can't be achieved in the locations proposed by the development. The other part was with respect to some of the safety concerns, I guess, with people walking in the area. Certainly Shepherd Place had the opportunity to have sidewalks when constructed, but residents at the time petitioned against that, and sidewalks weren't introduced on Shepherd Place. There is a proposal currently design-wise, sorry, I shouldn't say proposal, there's a current design for Bergie Court undergoing that would include the introduction of a 3-meter multi-use trail. That would ultimately connect the existing sidewalk at the end of Bergie Court to Bleams Road. So where there's considered to be potential conflicts between pedestrians and vehicles on where higher volumes exist on Bergie Court, the introduction of that 3-meter multi-use trail would address those types of concerns. But with the current homes on Shepherd Place, it appears to function appropriately without sidewalks. This development currently is not proposing developments, is less in unit count than Shepherd Place. That said, there are opportunities, and certainly through site plan approval standards and through that site plan approval review, we often see concepts further refined. So the developer is aware of the comments. We have had discussions to suggest that through site plan control, they look at opportunities to add additional amenities, perhaps a sidewalk, if it's achievable. But from a functional standpoint, the size of the development, the number of homes, there's not anticipated to be a significant conflict between pedestrians and vehicles, similar to the existing Shepherd Place street. The last part I'll just touch on, there were some comments about this development being premature at an approval stage until such matters as sidewalks parkland amenities, snow storage provisions were looked at. And staff would suggest that the concept provides adequately the opportunity for these things to be considered at the detailed site plan approval stage. There are spaces available on the site for snow storage. At a zoning stage of scale of development, we typically don't see those details, but it is commonplace and consistent in our development approval practices to ensure that adequate snow storage exists. Sometimes, the way developments proceed, they may not have sufficient space to store snow in the volumes we're seeing right now, but we have existing plazas, existing residential developments, and even on municipal streets where snow removal operations are required to remove snow from site. So certainly the preferred option is to provide snow storage on site. In extreme situations, snow removal may be required, and that's commonplace. But there are locations on the current proposal that could accommodate snow storage. Those details are always looked at the site plan approval process stage, should the zoning be approved. Similarly, with respect to sidewalks, I already commented, there is opportunity to give that consideration. And lastly, with respect to parkland and amenity areas available, certainly there's a large portion of this property that will remain open space, open area that's available for a field play through the site plan approval stage. If the developer wanted to consider parkland amenities for this development, there is space to do so. And there's also an existing sidewalk connection to the Riverside Park on the other side of the Highway 7 and 8 that's directly connected to this existing Shepherd Place neighborhood, as well as this proposed development that provides existing municipal park facilities to existing and future residents. I think I've gone through the highlights that I wanted to bring to the attention of council. Certainly there's lots of details in the report. I understand there'll be others speaking to the matter, and staff are certainly available to answer questions.
Thank you very much, Manager Martin. Councillors, just a reminder, we do have 3 delegates on this topic, but if anybody has any comments or questions right now for Manager Martin, Councillor Cressman.
Excuse me. Through you, Mayor, to Director Martin. On page 9 of 12, you have the different densities. Are any of those of the magnitude in terms of 35 townhouses or more, or 30 to 35, or are they, in the neighborhood of 5 or 8, or I'm just trying to identify which ones are of this magnitude, 35.
Through Mayor Solomon, there is a range in there. 35 wouldn't be the maximum that we've seen within developments. So I would say on average here, though, there are in the 15 range is common, some above, some below. But it isn't, I'm not, in that comparison, I'm not comparing developments that see 4 units or 5 units versus a 35-unit development. We're trying to draw comparables to that exist through the urban areas.
Follow-up for Councillor Cressman.
Yeah. Follow-up, just I understand Waterloo Federation sent a letter in support of approval of this. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Solomon, so in the comments that were attached in the report, there was a letter from the Federation that certainly supported the need for intensification and infilling, and there were some suggestions in their comments that they would be supportive of a density higher than what's being proposed by the development.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. A couple of questions. Is the density, is the infill any different than when there is a brand new subdivision? Is the intensification different from one to the other?
Through Mayor Solomon, so we provided some comments in the report. I know that was a discussion that was at the public meeting. So there are policies in the official plan that speak to the type of housing that's required in greenfield developments or properties over there's a threshold in there, but essentially greenfield developments. So that speaks to there being units other than singles, semis, and townhomes, requiring that at least 30% of the units within a development being other than that. So the idea is it's grouped singles, semis, and towns into the same. So that's for greenfield development. In terms of intensification, there is an overall target that a percentage of our growth is achieved through infilling and intensification. but it doesn't speak to a specific target per development. But the target that's within the zoning bylaw is what currently speaks to the permitted density on the site.
Let's follow. So I think there's 40 homes there now, single-family homes. So 35 would be almost a 50-50 split there from single-family to multiple. Yes? No? Looking at me like I'm crazy?
No, Mayor Allen, yeah, I would agree. There's currently 40 homes on Shepherd Place, and this development is proposing 35 units, yeah.
Okay. Oh, and one more. Snow removal, would that be, if that was an issue, would that be up to, who would have to pay for that?
Through Mayor Allen, so the on-site snow removal is the requirement of the residents of that. So depending on the form and tender of development, if it was proposed through condominium in the future, the condominium corporation would be responsible for those contracts. So we include language within site plan approval documents, the agreement and the site plan that speaks to requirements for that. But the implementation and payment ultimately is the ownership of the property.
Any additional questions at this point before we invite up our delegates? Okay, seeing none. As I mentioned, we have 3 registered delegations for this item. Our first delegate is Mary Lou Tanner of NPG Planning Solutions to address council. Thank you very much, Mary Lou, for joining us, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mayor Salonen and members of council. It's a pleasure to be back here with you this evening. My name is Mary Lou Tanner. I am the president of NPG Planning Solutions, and I just have a very brief presentation. I will say we support the staff recommendation and request that you approve it this evening. I also will not repeat the comments of Mr. Martin, but I certainly share his comments as he's provided you the update. If we could go to the next slide, please. So this slide shows the property and neighborhood. You are more familiar with it than I am. I should also say that the owner of the property, one of the owners, Adam Langlois, is here also this evening. We have worked since we were here at the public meeting to reflect on the comments that we received, and I greatly appreciate all the time and energy that the neighbors provided in preparing their comments and submitting them to us. And to the best of our ability, we've tried to respond to them and make some changes to the site plan. So let's go to the next slide, please. So we have, as Mr. Martin indicated, updated the concept, and we'll move on to the next slide, please. When I was here in September, I indicated to you that we were at a point where we were waiting for the peer review of the noise study and that it could potentially drive changes to the site plan. It did. There were technical requirements in updating it that were provided in the peer review comments, and those resulted in what you see as item number 2, which is an increase in the height of that noise wall from 4 meters to 4.6 meters, and that is based on updated traffic information from particularly Highway 7 and 8. In addition, we came to an agreement and understanding on that peer review related to the industrial properties to the north, and that there was not noise impact, so the remaining recommendations in the noise report were sustained. What that meant was that we did not need to do a wholesale redesign of the site in terms of the layout of the blocks or the street townhouses. But we did have a lot of discussion about the issues on Shepherd Place, and we have made adjustments to the rear yards where you see that number 1 and the line between Shepherd Place, which is on the right, and the blocks to the left. We shortened the rear yards in both, and then we pushed the street townhouses on Shepherd Place back further by 1.5 meters. We also, in discussion with township staff, you may recall the first concept had a sidewalk on Shepherd Place. That has been removed, as there are no sidewalks on the balance of Shepherd Place, and it would be a sidewalk serving this development. But what that has done is it's allowed us to extend the driveways. We've also widened the driveways, so there is now parking for additional cars off of Shepherd Place, and there will be an opportunity for 4 cars in the driveway as well as the garage. The cars in the driveway would be tandem, so one behind the other, 2 and 2. Next slide, please. So just Just to further zoom in on the particular noise wall issue, it is right adjacent to the floodplain, and as I said, it's because of increased traffic volumes on the highway, resulting in a bit higher noise wall requirement. We can go to the next slide, please. So in summary, we have reviewed all of the feedback we've received. There were meetings between the owner and neighbors and looked at a number of options, as the staff report indicated, for redesigning the unit frontage on Shepherd. It was not a feasible solution that could be implemented, so we have retained the townhouse form at 2 stories. We have increased the parking, and to the best of our ability responded to the particular parking concerns. As Mr. Martin indicated, there is a letter on your agenda tonight, and the matters in that can be dealt with through site plan, and I concur with that, and we're certainly open to those conversations through the site plan process. So we do, as I indicated earlier, support the staff report and request that you approve that report this evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for joining us, Mary Lou. Councillors, any questions? Councillor Cressman.
Yes, through you, Mayor. I was just wondering, in Area 2, where you increased the noise wall by 0.6 of a meter, that's to benefit the new owners of the town halls or the townhouses that are being built, or is that to benefit Shepherd Place residents? I was a little unclear what purpose that, because it's on kind of the corner of the development, you know, and I'm trying to figure out who's benefiting from that noise.
Thank you very much, Councillor Cressman, through you, Mayor Salonen. It is largely for the development, but there will be noise attenuation that benefits on Shepherd Place from that noise wall a little bit, but also the various units, they will break up the sound coming from the highway.
Any additional questions, councillors? I did just have one, Mary Lou, and I may have misheard, but I believe you had said that it was not feasible to have no units facing Shepherd Place. Is that correct in what you had said?
Not quite.
Okay.
I may have misspoken, so I apologize for that.
Could have misunderstood.
We did look at, the owner did look at options for changing the number of units, moving to a bungalow type townhouses, a bungalow. It left the interior space not feasible, and so those were not pursued any further.
Okay, thank you very much. Any other questions, councillors? Okay. Oh, sorry, Councillor Cressman.
Just so I'm judging this properly through you, Mayor, Shepherd Place is a township street, correct?
Yes.
Yes, okay.
All right. Thank you very much for joining us this evening, Mary Lou. I would like to invite our next delegate, Ryan Monsey from Urban Insights Incorporated, to address council. Ryan, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor, councillors, staff, neighbors, and proponent. I'm just going to walk through a couple of slides with you and to talk about a few of the planning issues that were raised, but we're coming at it from a slightly different perspective. Before I start, I've been planning for 25 years with 20 years in the municipality as a former chair of Site Plan Review Committee, so I'm quite attuned to what happens at site plan stage. I just put that out there for the council. Next slide, please. This is a neighborhood context. Large estate homes and a rural standard, suburban standard with a lot of street trees facing the end of the street. What we're talking about today isn't an issue of contesting townhouses, it's the issue of fit. This is about putting 10 pounds in a 5-pound bag, and there isn't the standards to make it work functionally. I would contest that in terms of the site plan. There's some key issues that will affect the layout of the units if it were to be proposed as a concept in more detail. Where I'm going with this is that the densities that we're talking about in the report is an average of suburban and urban infill. This is suburban. How does this compare against rural lots, not urban lots? Next slide, please. Wow, I should have brought my glasses. The key issues that I think from this site plan that it's hard to tell is that I disagree that there's enough room for snow storage. I disagree there's enough room to put internal sidewalks in this site plan because you can barely put a car in the driveway internal to the space. It's good that there is extra depth of no sidewalks on Shepherd Place, but it's a frontage driveways, which is very different. If you can go back just for a second. Thank you, Mandy. That's the frontage. What you're going to see there is basically driveways. And so the issue isn't having reverse lots. Maybe you could put some wide, shallow lots of 1 or 2 detached homes on that street to make it fit better and to have that rural-urban transition between the 2 different developments. It's tight on the inside. Next slide, please. So we talked about no sidewalks. This is internal to the development. There has to be garbage trucks that come into the site. What happens when the young kids are walking through there on garbage day and it's reversing in and out and there's no sidewalks to go on? There's no amenity spaces in here for the kids to play. Yes, they can have an open field, but there's nothing on the site plan that shows that. Is there too many units on the site? Talk about neighborhood transition. The issue isn't the townhouse as a land use. I agree, townhouses can fit into almost any neighborhood. But as previously stated, there's a greater mix of townhouses and subdivisions with a mix of housing. Maybe a mix of housing would be more appropriate here on a couple of the lots. And overall, does the site function? I'm here to say that the site plan that's shown as a concept is a land use plan. You can deal with the details through the site plan process, but you better make sure it functions at zone change stage if you're presenting a concept to council and the neighbors. And so with some subject to some refinements further, it sounds like the proponents do not want to make any further changes. You're going to have a plan in there that you will decide on to say, is this good planning or is it premature, and have you done enough homework? I don't think there's enough homework done on this. So you have a choice to defer it and to come back with subject to further refinements to make sure you're completely satisfied that you can fit sidewalks in there, because in a new subdivision, you would have sidewalks. There are none in the internal side of this development. How do you create a streetscape transition? This is great for a downtown urban infill, but how does it fit in a rural setting? Is there enough amenities that the residents with the 35 units can fit on here? Or do you need slightly less units to have all these amenities to create this complete community? So we present to you 2 different positions. One side that says approve it, they're in support of staff report. Another side of the residents, which I represent, the residents of Shepherd Place, to say not enough homework has been done and there isn't enough transition. So with that, you have a decision to approve it, to defer it, to continue to work through to see if there's more continued ground over the next month or 2, and to come back for one final position, or to refuse it. And we're presenting an opposite position to say, we think this is overdevelopment and should be refused. That's my presentation. I wish I had come in here with more positive news on a night filled with trying to get housing to the market, but it has to be functional as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Ryan, for your presentation. Councillors, do you have any questions for Ryan? I did just have one, Ryan. When you said that you're representing the residents on Shepherd's Place, is that all of the residents or a select few? I'm just trying to get a better grasp myself.
Mayor, it's a great question. And so I have a group of residents that have signed a contract with me on there. And maybe by show of hands, how many are from the residents of, okay, I think you have a sense.
Very good. Thank you. Councillor Martin?
Well, through you, Mayor Salonen, just in follow-up to that question, though, do you know the numbers of people? How many live on Shepherd Place and how many are contracted with you?
No, I don't have that specific, but happy to come back if you defer this and provide that information.
Thank you. Any other questions, councillors? Okay, seeing none, thank you again, Ryan, for joining us and for your presentation this evening.
Thank you very much.
And I will now invite up our final delegate on this topic this evening, and that is Timothy Hall. Timothy, thank you very much for joining us this evening, and you will have 7 minutes.
Thank you,
Sorry I didn't have papers, I had to go on the phone. Madam Mayor, elected councillors, thank you for your time today. I'm really not sure how to start this discussion or this plea, other than to quote a colleague of mine, common sense is no longer common. I want to be clear that I'm not speaking today to stop growth or to stop change. I'm speaking today to stop greed and personal agendas over community. In my line of work, my only goal is to ensure that every party at the table leaves with a win. Even though I'm not getting paid to speak here today, that goal is still the same. In this case, I've honestly spent the last half year trying to look at things from each group's perspective, the applicant, the township, and the local community. I'll start with the group I'm currently associated with, the local community, more specifically, a resident of Shepherd Place. I've never heard the term NIMBY until going into this process. The term was explained to me as basically a group of people that prevent change solely for the purpose of not in my backyard. What I can tell you is that there has not been one person on Shepherd Place that I have spoken with that is against the development on that land in question. However, in the same token, there hasn't been one person that has been supportive of the current plan as laid out. During the first review of this application, in this same room, the question regarding alternative plan was brought up 3 times, I believe. Not once was one presented, only a response of, we are waiting for the noise study to come back before further considerations. Between the last council meeting and today, representatives from Shepherd Place discussed options with the applicant for single-level bedroom townhomes in the range of 25 units. However, from what I've heard today, there's still no alternative to multi-level, fully packed townhouses maximizing the development and potential residents. It was made clear that it was not within their business plan. I could tell you as a precursor to later topics, there would be close to a 50% interest from the local community to purchase a single-level, single-bedroom unit supporting the applicant and the development. At the same time, I can see a 100% chance that if this proposal goes ahead as is, the Shepherd Place community will not just sit back, they will buckle up for the long haul. So that brings me to the shoes of the applicant. Truth be told, I looked at buying the Berge property back in 2014 and even went to the planning department to discuss the possibility of severing the land into 4 lots. That was quickly turned down to the fact that it didn't fit the township plan, as well as existing concerns over emergency services and additional services such as garbage removal. However, here we are 10 years later and under new leadership, new council, and well, a very different severance and development plan. I completely understand the thought behind the original applicant to get as many buildings and therefore as much value out of the property. As long as the various levels of approvals, like the GRCA, the MTO, and etc., get all the checked boxes, what would it matter? Remember, the world today is not about what's right, it's about what's permitted. So, do I blame the applicant, hold any animosity, jealousy, envy, hatred, any of those negative emotions? No, it's a hard no. In fact, I must give the applicant some kudos. It would take a heck of a bankroll, patience, and a number of sleepless nights stressing over the what if when shooting for the moon. In the end, nothing for them needs to change unless the township rejects, places amendments on the application. Would I care about the neighbors, residents? Nope. It would take, I can sell to a developer long before the shovels break ground. I've got nothing to lose but time and no need to sink any additional planning funds until the township says otherwise. That leaves the township. In my 15 years living in Wilmot, I've had difficult but positive experience with the planning and building groups. Even during the so-called Will Not Township days, everyone was very clear that liability and community precedent was first and foremost. That being said, I've never seen such an about-face to development and push-through for approvals with huge red flags on reports and little regard to common sense as this one. Just one example is the transportation study. The study area completed and agreed upon from the township was the intersection of Berge and Shepherd, as well as the Berge Court access site. Let me say that again. The intersection of Berge and Shepherd, as well as the Berge Court access site. So not Berge and Bleems, the main entry and exit into the Shepherd Place subdivision, along with a half a dozen commercial businesses. In the report, it states that there's no upgrading on the street on the horizon. But again, that might just be to the 2 intersections involved in the study. So it seems extremely irresponsible not to consider the commercial traffic on the half dozen businesses, but also the amount of flow traffic on beams, on a bend, with a newly introduced entry and exit onto another commercial property, the TLC facility. So I'm not sure those A scores would stand on a current traffic study if the Bleems and Berge intersection was considered. Therefore, I'm left to believe that If this application gets approved, it will be on the township and therefore on the taxpayer to solve the problem with Bleems, Bergie, and the TLC intersection. This is the kind of lack of future forethought or maybe in-depth investigation that the township is normally bang on about. That is what baffles me about this application. Check boxes for growth plans do not consider the minute details. Check boxes just say they fit the growth plan. It is the basic life elements that are not considered in this application that cause extreme frustration and projections for day-to-day hazards. Look at the snowfall we had this year. Where will that accumulation go? Do you think there will still be 14 parking spots available in this development? There's technically less than 0.5 visitor parking spots per townhome. Yeah, that won't cause any issues. So Stonecroft, use that as an example for planning. There is no street parking allowed at any time due to emergency service requirements. Look at this application layout with a potential of 100 to 280 residents. What is the plan for additional vehicles? Is the township going to have a bylaw officer hang out there every day? There is the potential for extra revenue, I guess. The regional planning report states that this application conforms to the growth plan through gentle intensification. There is nothing gentle about this growth plan. Sorry, I just wanted, with these clear and open questions in mind, I wanted to highlight a section within the documents that every participant had to agree to and understand to take part in this meeting today. In this role and duty of elected representatives, appointed local board, this is the roles and responsibilities of part 3 in the general comment. It is the role and duty of all elected representatives, appointed local board and committee members, and all staff to serve the residents of the township, businesses of the township. Residents of the township, businesses of the township will be conducted in the best interest of the residents as a whole and not need to serve the interest of one individual or group of individuals above the common good. Business will be conducted with transparency and openness and will facilitate an open, accessible communication to the members of the public. So again, I plead with you, our elected officials, to not to deflect responsibility onto the firms hired for their studies because they contain verbiage alleviating them of liability or responsibility. Please look at these issues at a granular level and not as a check box. As this application stands right now, there's only one of 3 parties standing to gain, the applicant. I could try to book ahead, but I don't know if I can do it in a minute. Or we can go and look at this as a win-win-win. You, as our elected officials, as our elected leaders, have the ability to place amendments on the process and the application to fit the growth plan and the benefit of the township. The proposed land can easily fit 25 single-bedroom, single-level attached homes, much like right next door here on Castle Kilbride View here in Baden. However, in this case,
just wrap up in about a sentence or two.
I'm almost there. I'm really almost there. However, in this case, the entrance to Shepherd Place can be left alone and there can be 2 entrances coming off of Bergie in a U format. This will keep intact the Shepherd Place street frontage and the setbacks and alleviate the potential parking concerns, especially appeasing the local residents of Shepherd Place. That's win number 2. The applicant of this still is 25 units or more depending on how good the developer group is. I'll kind of do that as a nan and I'll just skip to that. So that's basically all I'm asking. Please don't look at the check boxes and be nearsighted. Look internally and review the roles and responsibility covered in 3.11 and conduct business in the best interest of the residents as a whole and not just the individual. This is the 3rd win for you as a group. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Timothy, and I know how hard it can be to try and get everything in when there's the clock there. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor, I just want to double check. You had mentioned that you had looked into doing some kind of building 10 years ago and that you were refused or you were told not to.
It was just a consultation. There was nothing in writing. I didn't put in an application. It literally just went to the planning department. I was looking at purchasing just the Bergie farmhouse, the original home, and then looking to sever into 3 or 4 lots.
And what were the issues that you were told about when you were just inquiring?
One of the issues was plumbing. They weren't sure of the capacity at the time for the plumbing, but then with my projected, napkin sketches, it was more along the lines of you need to really consider snow removal, you need to consider garbage removal, and this will be probably rejected because it doesn't fit into the township growth plan.
Great. Follow up, sorry, Manager Martin. And are those concerns no longer valid or no longer an issue?
Councillor Dunstall, can I just have you hold that question for after our delegate is sat back down? I just don't want them to have to stand up there if other councillors have questions for the delegate. Okay, I'm not seeing any, so thank you very much, Timothy, for joining us this evening. So now I will let your question stand, Manager Martin.
Thank you, through you, Mayor Salonen. While I don't recall all of the specifics of previous inquiries, I would have been here at the time and had those conversations. What strikes me as the concerns that were raised at the time were the requirements for what would need to happen for reconstruction of Berkey Court to provide services to individual lots off of that street. Certainly the infrastructure required for single lots fronting on Municipal Street are different than a condominium or internal facing lot where one service connection is provided. So certainly there would have been no discussions about land use compatibility. It would have been related to the servicing and infrastructure requirements for street fronting severed lots onto Berkey Court.
Councillors, additional questions or comments on this item? Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, is there any appetite at all from the developer proposing this development to make any further modifications? I mean, in general, I guess what I'm getting at here is like on one hand, I see where development and housing is very good. On the other hand, I mean, I think it's unreasonable when you look at the comparison of how we're building out an existing neighborhood. And I also struggle with the fact that typically what happens in this case is a group of residents who live in an area, they feel like second-class citizens when a developer can basically buy a lot and develop. And I like to think that I want to represent the folks that live here and pay taxes here versus the folks that are potentially coming. In a perfect world, I'd put a sign up and say town's full and call it a day. So I'm curious if there is any potential for movement from the developer to scale this back at all.
Through Mayor Salonen, I can't answer that question other than the responses that we received to date were that we've reviewed, they reviewed opportunities for development of the site with their home designer, determined that it wasn't feasible for what they were proposing for the site. I can't speak to their appetite for further refinements to the development concept. We reviewed things from a planning perspective on the technical aspect, and certainly despite comments earlier would suggest that we have enough information to adequately determine that the site can function as proposed. But in terms of the developer's appetite towards refining further, I can't make those comments.
Follow-up for Councillor Wilkinson.
Through the chair, not to Manager Martin, but more so I think as an open question to staff as a general procedural point, and this is where I think I'm thinking, and perhaps councillors have a similar question, but if this were to say be deferred or turned down in any way, typically, and I'm looking for confirmation on this, but typically what we would expect is that the developer, the applicant in this case, would likely move to the Ontario Land Tribunal and dispute the decision being made. So knowing that that is likely, and you can comment on if it is, the question, and even just principally raised by the previous delegate, when we talk about representing the town as a whole and the greater good, now I question where my residents of Ward 2 would feel coming from this, because the costs associated with fighting anything at the OLT from that perspective can be substantial. I mean, we can, if I'm not mistaken, anywhere between 250,000 upwards of $1 million potentially, which can present a significant burden to the taxpayer in general in the wider township. Am I fair in that assessment? Is there anything to add?
Through you, Mayor Salonen, to Councillor Wilkinson. Yeah, you've pretty much hit all the key points. The applicant would have the ability to appeal any decision that opposes it or defers it, depending on if there's a timeline for that appeal. The only thing that's changed in, say, the last year, I guess, I don't have the exact date, I think it was October, maybe not. I don't have the exact date, but the province removed the right of neighbors to appeal decisions that they don't like. And so in this case, The only right of appeal ultimately is the developer has a right to appeal. The residents do not have a right to appeal. So you would be essentially taking on, in the past there have been applications where residents appeal a decision or developer appeals a decision, and the OLT hearing ultimately seems to be between the residents and the developer. In this case, it would only be between the township and the developer. So there would be costs involved, and that's the reality of being the planning authority moving forward, is that we need to make decisions based on what we feel is appropriate. In this case, as Manager Martin has indicated, from a technical perspective, we feel the site works, but from a council perspective as to how much density is good, how much is bad, this fits to the policies, but it's the decision of council ultimately whether you support the application or not.
And just to articulate that decision about the ability not to appeal is a provincial decision. I just want everyone to be well aware of that. Councillor Dunstall.
I think I will let my person here go first, and then I will go.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I think about a number of things. I realize that all of you are here with significant concerns, and I can appreciate that. I didn't appreciate when Manager Martin was speaking that some of you were laughing or snickering, because he's just doing his job. Manager Martin is a planner, and he has to follow the rules of planning as the province dictates. And so, we're in this conundrum. I'm willing to listen. Councillor Dunstall and I are meeting with somebody on Wednesday morning from Shepherd Place. I also have talked to some people that live on Shepherd Place that are not opposed to this. So I realize that not everybody who lives on Shepherd Place is against this development. And so I'm in a conundrum. Some of you I know are saying we should not have the driveways facing Shepherd Place. At the same time, when the planner presented, the planner that is here from Shepherd Place, he's saying there should be sidewalks, but at the same time, we're allowing no sidewalks on Shepherd Place. As far as I can see, there's no park in Shepherd Place, and so we're concerned about having a park in this townhouse development, if I've understood correctly what the planner was saying. But somehow the children who live on Shepherd Place are playing. Now I realize people might say, well, we have a bigger backyard. So I'm in a conundrum because we've been under a lot of opposition over the last year regarding taking up farmland. And this is a development that doesn't take up any farmland and is a solution for bringing in housing into our town. So I'm not saying that I've made any final decision. I'm just saying it's a conundrum. And I realize I'm not in any way trying to be disrespectful to you coming. I appreciate you coming, but we need to have propriety and decorum in our discussions. And so that's important. Thank you.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. Two things here. Manager Martin, is it within our right as a council to say that 35 is too many and 30 would be more acceptable? Is that something that we can do or no?
Through your Mayor Salonen, council has the opportunity to do whatever they feel is appropriate. What we've presented is the planning background based on the function of the site, the supporting documents, but ultimately council makes this decision. Whether what comes of that decision from the applicant's perspective, if they don't support the decision of council, has already been highlighted. But certainly, council can make whatever decisions it feels is appropriate.
Okay, and secondly, Mayor, I would like to put forward a motion to defer this, allowing the residents once again to speak with the applicant, and I'm hoping that the applicant will consider reducing the amount of townhouses. I'm not sure if I can have a seconder for that, but that's the motion I'm putting on the table, to have this deferred till the next meeting, the end of March.
So just to clarify, are you speaking to our council meeting? Because with the committee structure that we've recently gone to, technically it would be going to the next meeting for final approval should council approve this. So I'm assuming if you want to defer, it would be the next committee of the whole meeting, but I'm looking to the clerk.
Which would
for-
be the first week of April? I think?
Yes.
Yep, that would work for me, that's fine.
Okay. Is there a seconder for that? Question of clarification
It's
from
through the chair.
Councillor
Question of
Wilkinson.
clarification on that is, what implications does that potentially present? Is a deferral viewed in the same way? Would it give rights to an applicant to appeal?
I would look to staff for that. Manager Martin.
Yeah, through Mayor Sullivan, it comes down to the timeframes of the Planning Act, so it's not a decision, but you could appeal for lack of decision. I haven't done the number of days calculation at this point, but it wouldn't be the deferral itself wouldn't be the trigger. It would be whether the 90 or 120 days rather has expired, which in this case I believe would. Not to say that it automatically creates an appeal. It would be up to the applicant whether they choose to do that. But it would be appeal for lack of decision, not the appeal of the deferral itself.
A question of clarification from Councillor Cressman, or were you seconding the deferral?
So a question as it relates to timing. DCs have a clock ticking on them. And if we pass a magical time, then DCs, we lose DCs on certain type of housing, or is that just subsidized housing? This to Director Martin. I know there was some discussion on that about the province changed the rules, and then there was a thing about the clock ticks on application for housing, and if we don't meet a certain time limit on an application, the DCs are, I think it was 93 days or something, but I had, maybe I hit my head that day, I don't know.
Through Mayor Sullivan, there were changes relative to forms of housing for like affordable development, affordable housing developers, affordable housing units that were added. This is not proposed to be that, so it wouldn't be applicable. There would be, the DC rates are frozen based on application times in the DC Act, so it doesn't really change anything at the end of the day.
Still looking for a seconder, or?
Yes, just one moment before that. Manager Martin, if we had a 5-minute recess, would that give you enough time to determine if it would meet the number of days if it were to be deferred at the proposed time? I'm just wondering if council were to make a decision, I'd want them to have that information clearly, but would about a 5-minute recess give you time to?
It's beyond that. It would be beyond the time frame.
Okay, so it definitely would be beyond that window. Okay, so we currently have Councillor Dunstall who has put forward a motion to defer this decision until the April meeting. So that would be the first week of April. Is there a seconder for that motion? Okay, I am not seeing the seconder at this time. So back to discussion of the motion that is before us. Councillor Cressman.
Point of order, I'm just trying to figure out through what we're deciding this evening. This is direction towards the end of the month. So we get a window of opportunity for consultation or whatever. So that was my point.
Yes, that is correct. So again, with the committee structure, right now this is committee of the whole, so should we pass the motion before us either exactly as currently worded or amended, then that would go to council, our council meeting, for final approval from council, and then finally passed for a first, second, and third time in open council. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. And I know you just did such a great job explaining it, but I really want to explain it to these people here who came out here, is that what we decide on today we can still make some changes to that at the next meeting, correct?
Yes, so if this were to be passed successfully tonight by committee, then it'll be referred to our council meeting, which would have another opportunity for council's input. What I would maybe suggest, though, is it sounds like council or some of council is perhaps looking for some more discussion to occur, if I'm reading the room correctly. I would maybe suggest having an amendment that is looking for that so that we don't come to having no change, because right now there wouldn't actually be an active change from what's proposed on the floor to what would be presented at council unless we made an amendment asking for some sort of action. So an example of that could perhaps be having staff look into the intersection that Timothy had mentioned for review or something. I'm not saying that that's what we need to do. I'm simply saying that if you are hoping for something different than what this report is, we would need to direct staff to do that. Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, this is not about that so much as just a question about the sidewalk on Bergie. Can I ask a question about that, or do you want to respond?
No.
So I understood through you, Mayor Salonen, I understood, Manager Martin, that you were saying there could be a plan in place for a sidewalk on Bergie, but at this point it's not definite. So if you went from Bleams Road down Bergie to Shepherd Place, that's where the sidewalk would be. Is that correct?
Through Mayor Salonen, so there is a design for Bergie Court. So currently there is a sidewalk that would take you from this development under Highway 7 and 8 over to ultimately downtown. To connect out to Bleams Road, the plan is to install a 3-meter wide multi-use trail and upgrade the current sidewalk that runs down to the highway to use it for multi-use purposes. This development doesn't trigger those requirements, but it is currently being designed and ultimately will come back to council for approval of that road project. So that is in the plan. If I could just, while we're talking about traffic a little bit, just about the traffic study. So the application was circulated to the Region of Waterloo, who's responsible for the intersection of Bergie Court and Bleams Road. The Region of Waterloo did not have any concerns with the proposal and didn't require anything to be included within the TIS, so that's where that requirement would have been. So it came down to, the scope was narrowed down to ensure that there was no functioning issues at the street. The road itself was wide enough to accommodate traffic, and then the ultimate intersection of Bleams and Bergie Court was under the jurisdiction of the region, who didn't express any concerns and didn't require further analysis.
Thank you. We'll go to Councillor Sadhu and then Councillor Cressman.
Thank you. If I'm reading the design correctly, I can appreciate that the sidewalks were removed in order to enlarge the driveways. With safety in mind and keeping in with other projects that have been happening in Baden and Wilmot, I see Coachman's Lane, Whitting Way, and another development further up from Schneider's. These are all intensification, semis, towns on larger lots, but they do all have sidewalks, whether it is on one side or both sides. I would ask that essentially go back to the drawing table and provide sidewalks at least on one side of every street, mostly for safety and as far as putting my hat on. If I'm going to be living here, I would want to see something like that, especially if there's going to be young families with kids playing and a lot of interactions with cars moving in and out. That's something I would ask that we do include in there.
So you would like an amendment just to clarify that we get information back on what sidewalks on the internal part would look like, or are you also now asking for it to be on Shepherd Place?
On the internal part.
Okay. So that's been moved by Councillor Sadhu. Is there a seconder for that amendment? Seconded by Councillor Dunstall. Now talking specifically about that amendment, any comments or questions of council? Seeing none, I will ask all those in favor. And all those opposed? And, okay, sorry, I just want to confirm that was opposed, Councillor Cressman? Yes. Okay, so that is carried, so that amendment has been added, so now we go back to the motion as amended. Councillor Cressman, did you have comments?
Yes, this is my ignorance about condominium life, since I've lived most of my life on a farm. When a condominium garbage is collected in a condominium area, is a private contractor involved, or is the municipal contractor the one that collects the garbage?
I will pass it over to Manager Martin, please.
Thank you, Mayor Sullivan. And so it does come down to the size of development and the willingness, I guess. In the previous, there was discussions, the region would have the decision of whether they wanted to serve the development or not. They established criteria. In this case, it's my understanding it would not be serviced by regional delivery, it'd be private collection, whether that be a centralized collection, which we typically see, Mollix or otherwise, or whether it be actual individual unit pickups would be something that would come up through if it were to be through a condominium, through that condominium declaration process. And ultimately, the site plan would reflect the choice of garbage collection services.
Follow up for Councillor Cressman? No? Okay. Councillor Dunstall?
Me again. Can I put through an amendment asking for there to be an investigation into reducing the amount of units? Is that something that I can do?
So as Manager Martin said, it is something you could do. I'd maybe suggest a ballpark. I think it's kind of arbitrary.
It is kind of arbitrary, isn't it?
Especially considering the feedback that we've already gotten. So I would just maybe suggest that I give a number. That would be my suggestion, but I will leave it up to you, Councillor, and of course,
I always
what
take your
Council decides.
suggestions, Mayor, so I will put in a number of 30 if it could be reduced to 30 instead of 35.
Okay, so that's been moved by Councillor Dunstall. Would there be a seconder for that? And just to clarify, is it that you just want this brought back for information, or you want it to say explicitly that we will not do more than 30?
You know what, I would bring it back for information.
Okay, so asking that they bring back if 30 is feasible. Seconded by Councillor Wilkinson. Questions or comments on the amendment? Councillor Martin?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, I'm wondering either Director Krafka or Manager Martin, if you'd be able to respond to what happens when council gives direction to planning. I'm just wondering, I understand that you are acting under certain rules that the province puts out, and so I don't know what that criteria is. What is within our purview? I realize Manager Martin saying, well, we can actually say yes or no, but at the same time, what happens? Can you give any direction to us if we try to get involved in the planning process?
Through you, Mayor Sallin, and to Councillor Martin. Certainly, council can give us a number. It's difficult to say, come back with whether it works. Obviously, 30 would work on this site. Like, I can tell you that now. I don't need to do a report back to you. 30 works on the site. 35 works on the site, so 30 definitely works on the site. It gives more space, more area. That's a decision that council can make. You've got the technical review to consider. You've got residents' opinion. You've got professionals on both sides of the application. Some saying it doesn't work. The applicant saying it does work. You've heard from previous discussions between the applicant and the residents that the residents have requested lower numbers, and by the sounds of the applicant has said, no, I'm going to proceed with 35. So council can make any decision that it wants on the number of units. Mr. Martin's review and my review, obviously in front of you, recommended is that 35 does work on the site, but council is free to pick 30. From a staff perspective, if it was 30, we would still support it. Having said that, if it would go to a hearing where council makes a decision, that would be ultimately for the OLT to decide what the appropriate number of units and density is for this site, which may be 30, maybe 35, or it could be a different number. But I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, but certainly you can give us direction to put any number you want in that bylaw. And ultimately, the applicant has the right to appeal that if they're not happy with that number, if it doesn't work for them. And certainly then, you know, obviously this report, township staff would be part of that hearing process. The applicant would be part of that hearing process. And at the end of the day, the OLT would decide what that number is. But so with all due respect, we can come back with a report right now that 30 works on that site because 35 works on that site.
Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just want to clarify, the OLT process, that would take, what's the timeline on that? If someone was to take it to the Land Tribunal, what are we looking at? 6 months, a year, 2 months? It's a long process, I believe. There's many cases.
It can be an expedited process, though, too, depending on the the pre-hearing and the identification of what the issues actually in front of the OLT are, right? So if it's the number of units, which has been suggested a number of times is the issue, then that would become the focus of the hearing. It could be, I don't know, it could be a half-day hearing. It probably would be a day or, but again, with the removal of the public from the appeals process by the province, a lot of these hearings are fairly streamlined.
So we do have, I guess, the amendment on the floor. Any other questions or comments, and we'll vote on that? Okay, seeing none, so all those in favor of the amendment, all those opposed, and that is defeated. So we're back to the motion as originally amended. Any other questions or comments at this time, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I will call the vote. All those in favor? And all those opposed? Oh, sorry, that passes unanimously. And just a reminder again, as we have switched to the committee structure, this will be coming back to council again at our end of March council meeting for, generally speaking, final decision. I say generally, we never know what will happen in this chamber if it gets deferred or not. So just for residents who are here to be aware of the process and next steps. On to report 12.6. And this is related to the Carmel Kosh on-road winter parking and RARE agreement. The recommendation is that council authorize the Township of Wilmot to enter into a contribution agreement with RARE Charitable Research Reserves to fund the installation of 20 on-road parking spaces on Carmel Kosh Road at the Snyder's Lands Bush Trail entrance, and that council approve the realignment of Carmel Kosh Road at Wilmot Line to establish a T intersection to reduce the speed of southbound vehicles and improve safety for drivers, pedestrians and users of the proposed parking area on Carmel Kosh Road, and that council approve a capital project for the work in the amount of $101,500 to be funded in the capacity of $70,000 from a RARE donation and then $31,500 from Transportation Capital Reserve Fund. To get this on the floor, may I have a mover? Moved by Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Wilkinson, and I will turn it over to our Director of Infrastructure Services, Jeff Mullenhouse, to introduce the report.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a follow-up report from the planning process and then subsequent reporting that we had related to the parking requirements for the Schneider lands and the RARE donation. Through discussion with RARE, we were both in support of actually expanding the number of spaces that we had originally talked about. So if you recall from the fall, we had talked about, I think, creating 8 spaces. And we are looking at 20 spaces through what is proposed here. The cost estimate has been updated as a result of that expansion, and so that's what the $70,000 contribution would be focused on as it relates to the parking area only. In our discussion with RARE, it was discussed that that's what they could agree to in terms of contributing. And so we looked at the intersection alignment sort of separately as related to the work in total that's proposed here. So when we look at what's proposed for parking, we are looking at RARE to contribute, and they are agreeable to that for the 20 spaces. The additional works for Carmel Cook, what we are looking at there is to, it's more so a traffic calming measure, I would say, and it's not necessarily something that's would be required as part of RARE's work, and so we would support that that be something that the township would address through our funding arrangements. The way that this agreement is structured, it's proposed in a manner that the donations would have to come in a certain time, and then we would have confirmation of that before we would start the work to complete design and then to proceed with construction. So the agreement gives us enough milestones and a few steps there so that we can track what's happening in terms of donations, and then we don't proceed if the donations are not there. And we have a method to get out of this process if we need to, and it's all outlined very clearly in that agreement. So staff see this as a reasonable and appropriate approach to solving the parking issues in this location, and we recommend moving forward with this agreement. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Director Mullenhouse. Questions? We'll go to Councillor Dunstall first.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just wanted to double check that money that the township has to pay, I forget what it was, 30,000 or whatever, that's already in the reserves. We have that money. Is that correct? Perfect, thank you.
Councillor Wilkinson?
Through the chair, a couple questions here. The proposal is to lay down proper asphalt. That's what I'm reading. I just want to confirm that.
Through you, Mayor. So the proposal would be to create parking spaces. And so what would have to happen is we'd have to reconstruct the shoulder and push the shoulder a little bit to, I'll say 2 or 3 meters expanded from where it currently is. And then, yes, we would be placing new asphalt in that location.
Follow-up for Councillor Wilkinson.
Yes, through the chair, there was a commentary regarding snow removal. The question is, how much additional time and cost estimate do you figure that the snow removal will take? And I guess the question is can this, in the design, potentially just be achieved through a plow versus having to send out a crew? Am I correct in that assumption?
Through you, Mayor. So that would yet to be determined, we'll say, but I don't envision that it would be anything overly difficult in terms of taking an additional pass at that location. I think that with a wing down, it may be, and depending on where we are within the lane, it may be something that's more feasible than it is now, because we actually will have a shoulder to, we'll say more of a shoulder to clear. And so at the initial pass, I think we would look at, it's probably able to be done with the resources that are out there. However, we do need to go through a season and see what it's actually like in terms of operation.
We will go to Councillor Cressman and then Councillor Martin.
So, where I come from, this is Carmel Cook Road, but that's just me. I'm wondering, going back to winter snow plowing, when my understanding is it's used highly when there's a new snowfall, and that's also when the road has to be cleared. How do we intend to resolve that? Especially we have to push the snow somewhere, and it'll be beside cars that are already parked there, etc. So what's your thoughts?
Through you, Mayor. So that, I think, just in terms of operations, if we're clearing forward or clearing to the side, it's just going to be pushed out of the way. And so I would expect it to be just like any other road operation, where we would do sort of a rough clear. And I guess that's kind of what we're referring to in terms of whether or not we need to address it through another smaller size unit to do a more thorough clean, if you will, or a more detailed clean. But yeah, I would expect it would operate similar to any other sort of road rural area where you have ditches and banks that can store.
Councillor Martin.
Through you, Mayor Salonen, I want to express my appreciation. I think this seems like a good way to handle parking. We struggled with that a year ago, or when it came to council in terms of decisions on this, and so I appreciate that. I don't know if Stephanie, I think is your name, Dr. Stephanie, or I'm not sure. I'm sorry. I also want to express appreciation to RARE, and thank you, Stephanie, for being in our meeting.
Any other questions or comments at this time? Councillor Dunstall, please.
Thank you, Through you, Mayor. I just wanted to make a statement that I was hoping that all of those people, those hundreds of people from Waterloo and Kitchener who sent us all of those emails telling us how much they so appreciated those trails and paths, if they would all be willing to give us, I don't know, maybe $10 each, I bet you we could probably pay for half of this. Thank you.
Funny, you were actually preempting my question for Director Molynhuis, and this is more so as direction. I'm not looking for a formal motion on it, but if we haven't already, could we go knocking back at our neighbors at the City of Waterloo who were really keen to help last year with this solution, and maybe see if they would like to contribute any funds?
Through you, Mayor, yes. So that's something that we've actually tried to set up with the city. In terms of having more routine sort of meetings specific to this particular road. It is a highly administrative process to manage Wilmot Line, and that's fine, but this is certainly an item we will be talking about.
Very good, thank you. Any other questions or comments, councillors? Okay, seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? and that carries unanimously. And on to 12.7, just noting Councillor Cressman does have a conflict of interest on this item. So the recommendation, I will note, I'm going to suggest that we change slightly from the recommendation and only do the first paragraph, as the second paragraph is redundant since we have made that funding decision already in budget. So just for streamline and clarity, I would suggest that we get a mover and seconder that council award RFT 2025-01 Victoria Street and Booley Street reconstruction to Cassidy Construction London Limited of London, Ontario, as per their tender submission on February 5th, 2024, as the lowest compliant bidder in the amount of $5,918,815.40 plus HST. May I have a mover? Councillor Dunstall, seconded by Councillor Martin. And I will invite Director Mullen Hughes to introduce this report.
Thank you, Mayor. So this is a fairly straightforward report. It's would normally be provided in consent in terms of construction and award like this. However, because it was something that we were looking at potentially for pre-budget approval, and we wanted to get ahead of timing for award of contract, it was actually put into a general report presentation format. So again, fairly straightforward report. Award to Cassidy Construction of London, and looking at the work that is proposed out here, we've been working on this project, I'm going to say, for close to 5 years now. So this is something that finishes off a link for regional water main, and it also provides for some additional needs in that area in terms of parking and other elements for sewer work as well. Happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you very much, Director. Any questions or comments, councillors? Seeing none, all those in favor? And that carries unanimously. On to announcements for this evening. Just a reminder that the Wilmot Community Services Department will be hosting a special meeting, a meeting for special event organizing groups and affiliated groups on Wednesday, March the 5th at 7 p.m. This will be taking place at our Wilmot Recreation Complex on the second floor in the Community Center. This purpose is for an information night to be providing information and updates on special events processes and our affiliation policy. The evening will be split into 2 sessions. The special event sessions will be for the first hour, followed by a short break to provide time for those who are only involved in special events to depart, and any affiliated groups can join at 8 p.m. Affiliated groups include any community groups, service clubs, minor sporting organizations, etc., who receive council-approved discounts on facility rentals. The second thing I wanted to note is our second community gathering for the Prime Minister Path Engagement Project is coming up on March 5th of 2025 from 4:30 to 8 p.m. at the New Hamburg Community Center. The theme of this is Collective Reflections, which is community input on proposed working group recommendations, and you can RSVP via Eventbrite by emailing pmp@wilmot.ca, or of course you can always just show up if it works for that evening. I also wanted to do a general PSA with the speed cameras in Wilmot and March break. They are still active during the March break, so if you are driving through those sections, mainly specifically referring to the high school, that it will still be 40 kilometers during the weekdays timing, even though students are off. So thought I would just let people know before I get some angry emails. Councillor Cressman for announcements.
Yes, I had mentioned previously March 16th, Sunday, March 16th, New Dundee Board of Trade has our pancake breakfast starting at 10 o'clock and ending at 1. $15 for adults, $7 for children under 12, and scrambled eggs, sausage, pancakes, of course, and maple syrup, which is locally produced near New Dundee and was the award winner at Elmira Maple Syrup Festival last year. So I don't know if it's good as Director O'Craft's maple syrup, but we could have a pancake eat off or something to determine that. So it's certainly everyone welcome.
Very good, thank you. Councillor Dunstall.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I just want to remind everyone that tomorrow evening, the Wilmot Junior Optimist is hosting their very first event, which will be a pancake dinner, and they are much more reasonable at $5 for each person or $20 for an entire family. So just wanted to put that out there. So hopefully we can see you tomorrow at Wilmot Rec Center, 5 to 7. Thank you.
Thank you very much, councillors. Any other announcements that councillors would like to make? Okay, seeing none. We do have business arising from closed, and the recommendation is that council directs the mayor and staff to proceed as directed regarding CAO recruitment. May I have a mover for that? Moved by councillor Cressman, seconded by councillor Dunstall. All those in favor? That carries unanimously, and I'd be looking for adjournment at 8:29 p.m. May I have a mover? Moved by councillor Martin, seconded by councillor Cressman. All those in favor? Thank you, and have a great evening, everyone.